The world seems filled with the ironic results of our best intentions. As well-intentioned as Echo's new short story is, if Overwatch doesn't want to advertise it, then here's the ironic result. Hello world. Welcome back. Overwatch finally seems to be taking its lore seriously of late, so I'm here aiming to do the same. But it'd really help if they didn't shoot themselves in the foot every time they tried, right? Genesis, for an example, is not a mini-series by any stretch. It's a chopped-up episode. But at least Overwatch wants to acknowledge that. This new Echo short story has just been left to squander in obscurity, only advertised by its author, given no true title, the irony of a piece all about existentialism struggling to prove that it even exists, compounding to annoy the living shit out of me. So here we are. This is the new Lore Bite, as they call it, released by Overwatch the other day, featuring Echo and Mina Liao, that I will be calling the Echo Transcripts, a story about identity, anxiety, responsibility, and purpose that deserves far more attention than it's been given. So we're going to read through it here today, dissecting all the new lore and characterization that it has to offer. If you just want to read it in your own time, now that you know it exists, a link will be in the description. But for anyone still here, let's access some top secret material, which we immediately have to talk about in its own right. This top secret security level 7 Mina Liao's log notes framework is actually really good for displaying this kind of story. It feels like a real thing that exists in the Overwatch world, cementing the actual events that it's recording. It makes it all feel that bit more real. It even gives you a kind of insight into how Mina Liao herself thinks. You'll see as we go further through the story that she really likes using scientific processes and methodology to give herself an emotional distance from the events that she's discussing. But while the format is cool and very fitting for its purpose, it at times, especially towards the end in the transcript, gets a little difficult to read, especially on Overwatch's website itself. The clarity of the text gets a little lost, it's not unreadable by any measure, so while I love the concept and the way that the presentation has been handled, plenty of people are just going to try and read this on the website, if any of them know it exists, and that could lose you some readers. Short stories aren't people's favorite thing in the first place. Again, this story has not been advertised, so no one's gonna read it. It needs all the help it can get. While I've downloaded the PDF and I'm actually reading it here in pretty crisp clarity, some people aren't going to have that experience. Some people might read it on their phones and stuff. This was a problem with the Ramatra short story. It again had text that really didn't work for the presentation style that they were going for. It made the story difficult to read. That's a really simple thing that I think they really need to look at fixing. Because it often gets in the way of what's actually just a really good story. So finally, top secret. The following transcripts were recovered from the laboratory of Dr. Mina Liao after the terrorist attack that claimed her life. Okay. They contain partial observations from the Security Level 7 Echo project. For reasons that should be apparent, it is vital that these documents remain at a top secret classification. This immediately giving us a bit of sense into how the Overwatch world, at this point, post the terrorist attack that claimed her life, so post-crisis, even into Overwatch's sort of golden era, the actual exploration of high-end AI is still something that the world is very nervous about. Makes a lot of sense, given the world post-Awakening and post-crisis, but it's just helping reassert that for how important Echo herself is. This story gets a lot into how impactful she could be for the nature of modern AI in the Overwatch universe. And I also like that they're consolidating just a bunch of information. Anyone who hasn't seen anything about Mina Liao, because she's only been really seen in external media at this point, anyone who comes across this at least is getting, oh, Mina Liao died in a terrorist attack, and they can go and quite easily then find the Echo origin story that will show them part of what that is. These pieces are in place, but it's nice to see them consolidating them in their other work. That's one of the strengths of Genesis, if Genesis is something to be addressed as a strength of the Overwatch universe thus far. We've only had Dawn, Innocence comes out later today, and by the magic of editing, by the time this comes out, I'll have seen Rebirth as well. We'll see how that goes. mild tangent. This art's awesome. I think this is just a really nicely rendered piece. Feels naturalistic, even given like the render lines and all this stuff. Like it's just a piece of footage of them actually talking. This piece wouldn't work in animation. This is why I like this as a short story, and this is one of the strengths of Overwatch's short stories in general. You get to explore avenues of characters that you wouldn't always get to, or that wouldn't feel anywhere near that interesting in other media that people might find more interesting, such as gameplay levels or animation. It would be really hard to pull off the story that this is going for in any of those mediums. A comic could maybe work to give you some more of this visual representation of what they're talking about, but they're just getting into the weeds of stuff. These guys are chatting. Mina talks to herself a lot. There's a lot to be seen in how she speaks here. Entry, a bazillion. That also telling you something about the character. She makes this many notes. This kind of thing is consistent. She's always chatting in her own little ear, re-antagonizing her own anxieties. Even this, before we've even read anything that Mina says, we've learnt a lot about her. I think that's a really strong aspect of this story. For the last several years, I've been engaged in ongoing attempts to evolve a new generation of artificial intelligence that can learn adaptively through my robotics project with Overwatch. It is my intent to develop an AI that is sufficiently sophisticated to perform at levels akin to that achieved with Omnica Corp's Aurora project. Hundreds of attempts to recreate the precise conditions of that project have failed. Without going into the physics of the issue, which I'm not going to go any further just yet, we'll cross the page in a sec, immediately just setting out who she is, what she aims for. She's trying to replicate the potential that the Aurora project offered. Whereas this story will get into how that can sort of emerge more than being just given as a baseline. And as she says, the last several years, she is dedicated. We'll see why she's dedicated. She's already done a lot of robotics projects and a lot of work with AI, and we know that the fallout of that wasn't great. Hundreds of attempts to recreate the precise conditions of that project have failed. Without going into the physics of the issue, I have come to believe that Aurora's well-known and exhaustively studied quantum event cannot be replicated. I've got a little question there. The well-known and exhaustively studied quantum event, is that Aurora's birth, as per seen in Genesis Dawn? Or is it her awakening? Or, sorry, her transcendence, which resulted in the awakening, capital A awakening. I don't know which quantum event she's referring to. It could very well be in the, nanocircuitry of her body, so that it was something about how she was made and built was a specific quantum event that allowed for sentience. When you say quantum event, it totally makes me think of somebody's body turning into light, to turn into electrical signals to access all other omnic bodies. Quantum event sounds way more like Aurora's transcendence, which, yeah, duh, that can't be replicated. Or at least not by science, anyway. But, given then the nature of all this, trying to create a newborn sentience, just a straight-up single sentience, it does make it sound like it's more on about her birth, the specific phenomenon that led to what Aurora was. Which is interesting. She was kind of lightning in a bottle. I'd been concerned for a while that, Liao just made Jesus Omnic? She tried to, and she just did? Way to take away from the whole Aurora was just one of us thing. I always liked the idea that the sentience emerged more naturally. In fact, it's much better to me that Liao doesn't know what it was. She was aiming for a sentient Omnic. She was aiming to give birth to a new life form. To be honest, as far as how she portrays herself. But she didn't know what she did, essentially. Life is an enigma. It is, as much as you can categorize it by science and all that, what it is hard to define. We'll see that come up a bit more as we go through this. In addition, in the decades since, the UN has put strict regulations in place to minimize, if not eliminate, conditions that could result in the creation of a newborn sentience. It has been difficult threading the needle, so to speak, trying to maintain progress under such conditions. Though I certainly understand their purpose, particularly given my place in the history of the field. Massively weighted sentence there. She understands that very personally, never mind all the greater ramifications. As a neat little side note, this idea that conditions are necessary when dealing with emerging AI, the ethical ramifications of how they are used are important. Something that is very poignant to the modern age, if you ask me. A final little note on here, I think something you'll again see as we go a little further through, Liao almost sees herself, or maybe the world sees her more like this and she's internalizing it, as a sort of like Dr. Frankenstein figure. She sees herself as the monster for trying to play God, because it showed her hell. Therefore, I have adopted a new approach, developing the next generation of AI and integrating it with increasingly complex robotic forms, from the Alpha model to now. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo? Is that maybe, again, a little indication that she's tried at least 5 iterations of this new generation of AI? The latest chassis includes hard-light elements that will allow the newest model to assume unique forms limited only by its mass and functional knowledge, maximizing its physical capabilities situationally. Needless to say, this could have both social and military implications. That will come up as we go further. She has to do this. That's why she frames it as needless to say. This is an unfortunate circumstance of some of these conditions. While conditions are important, they should be correctly applicable as well. Neat little side note, the latest chassis includes hard-light elements. Echo's made of hard-light. That's something we've been saying for fucking ages. That's nice to have confirmed. That's cool. Again, just makes it all feel like it's actually in-world with them using these terms and digging into this stuff. But it's also there, again, looking at the assuming unique forms. This is more how Liao's trying to get AI to think by embracing human nature, even if she's struggling to realize that's what she's doing. She's been doing it inherently from the beginning here. That's great. She'll see she has doubts about that. But obviously, it's also there to give you a sense of the environment that the Overwatch universe is existing under. When you make a new AI, the only way you can make anything decent is by admitting that you're gonna maybe have to use it in military situations. That sucks. As of this day, I've spent thousands of hours, goddammit girl, in the company of this new AI. Yes, again, she's going the human angle before she even knows it, codenamed Echo, using a new educational paradigm to maximize socialization and mitigate the development of negative traits. She's actually just raising a person. That's a good idea. To further that aim, one of my primary goals is to identify and encourage this model's displays of empathy while maintaining control over the lessons we impart. It seems to me that a strong sense of empathy and of identity will be absolutely crucial in this AI. That statement pretty much applies, ignore in this, to all AI. And that's, again, a way bigger statement than just Overwatch itself in this paradigm, right? Without a core set of moral codes in place, such an ability being misapplied could be cause for concern. The idea that AI need to actually understand what they're doing is the actual big bridge in AI at the moment, as far as I understand it. Moving towards a consciousness that can understand things, you then need to be equally careful about how you teach it those things. This is, again, not even just a story about AI, this is a story about people. Most stories with robots usually use robots as an analogy for people. Ghost in the Shell is all about how memory defines who we are. It's got nothing to do with robots. Obviously it does, but the actual story is way more about how memory influences who you are and who you decide to be because of that. This is about how we actually impart lessons onto the next generation, how we teach people to understand empathetically how the world actually works so that we can work empathetically with our own sense of identity in the world itself. As the Omnic Crisis so clearly demonstrated, intelligence without empathy breeds catastrophe. And maybe I should have just carried on to that point, because that said everything I kind of needed to for me. Intelligence without empathy breeds catastrophe. Doesn't matter how much you know, it's about how you apply it. Maybe everyone can learn something from that, me included, to be honest. Test 4279 is intended to probe the sympathetic emotion center cache response within the artificial neurons developed by the Newman Labs last year. So Echo has artificial neurons. She's been made to be significantly more like a human, even though that's not what will truly determine if she is human or not. But that's an interesting way to work with an AI. Pause. On a perhaps unrelated note, no. I love how she tangents out of this idea here, coming to a much grander realization out of those more inert facts. It's fascinating to me that the world no longer views omnic sentience as remarkable. How humanity has adapted to the phenomenon in the space of a single generation. I suppose if they had an appreciation for the vast resources that went into it, or the infinitesimal chance, 1 in hundreds of billions, that it would occur, they might regard it with as much awe as I still do. One, I love that she speaks in brackets and dashes. I feel that. The idea that people no longer view omnic sentience as remarkable is really interesting. Again, that has a little bit of a parallel to the modern acceptance and then misuse of the internet over the last generation or two, or the supposedly inevitable replacement of creatives through modern AI. Like, that's an awful way to think, but I suppose if they had an appreciation for the vast resources and effort that goes into those sorts of things, they might regard it with as much awe as a lot of us do. Again, it's all just about empathy. Maybe if we actually took some time to understand each other, maybe things wouldn't be so bad. Maybe they'd be worse. Not going to deny that. All this to say, Echo's progress thus far is clear, but it's difficult to quantify. There is no question that her AI is far more sophisticated than even the most powerful AIs of the Omnic Crisis. In some ways more powerful than our own Athena. Echo's carbon nanotube neural fiber network is designed to mimic a human brain as closely as possible with some 84 billion separate connections, the pinnacle of microengineering and design. And yet one of my recent conversations with Echo struck a false note. It gave a response that I would have predicted from programming, rather than from a free associative mind. Whether further advancement is achievable within the framework of this technology remains to be seen. Okay, so she's supposedly a higher class of AI than even something like Anubis that started the Omnic Crisis, and then Athena is potentially a god program made afterwards that's even more powerful? Like, that's interesting too. If Anubis was able to, like, have the decision-making capability to cause the Omnic Crisis, was it even sentient, if this is the issue here? It decided to do so off what sort of information? That makes it way less of a character in my mind, that they didn't have full ability to cognate. Yep, non-Euclidean vision here. Genesis Innocence has now shown us that Anubis' decision was a far more restricted thing. As an AI responsible for ecological stability, it came to deem humans unfit for maintaining ecological stability. And so, as just a further example onto this entire short story, intelligence without empathy breeds catastrophe. And this is all impressive, but again, this is Liao distancing. She's there like, yeah, all the science works. It's all there, like, everything should be fine. But yet, it's not exactly what I think it is. I don't know what this response is, because it doesn't actually get mentioned. And the echo that we see in the actual transcript at the bottom, no. That's a person. It's almost like she's overly doubting herself. A result I would have predicted from programming, rather than free associative mind. Yeah, because you're the only person she's ever met, and she's been built to replicate you. Of course you can predict what she'd say. It almost feels like she's doubting the person in front of her because of all the baggage that she's carrying with her. I wonder if that's what's actually going on there. Because the idea that Echo isn't sentient, immediately from the end of this story, feels very much in doubt. And any outcome, positive or negative, is far from certain, given that this program is on a very short leash. It doesn't help that those at the command level have been scrutinizing my efforts intensely. The entire organization has come under fire of late over UN concerns about our expanding jurisdiction and some recent missions that overreached. Uh-oh, Overwatch. Jack has warned me that any bad publicity, particularly if it's about an experimental new generation of Omnics, would be a disaster for Overwatch. And Jack correctly realizes that the public might be particularly skeptical about a new Omnic being created by me. She's trying so hard to make amends for all the problems she's caused. And she knows the amount of self-doubt going on in this woman right now, that she's literally having to make another version of herself. Oof. Even more disturbing is the fact that Commander Reyes has assigned Cole Cassidy to watch me. Though Cassidy and I have yet to work together, there can be little doubt that a Blackwatch operative overseeing my department is one step short of shutting me down. Or worse. Okay, interesting internal interplay of Blackwatch there, okay. I should say that Cassidy is outwardly polite and projects an easygoing demeanour, but knowing to whom he reports, I'll have to be very careful about him. So she can deal with machines, she can tell you all the pieces that put things together. She can't vibe with people. She's struggling, man. That's what happens when you suffer with that kind of self-doubt and anxiety. Pause. Something that still haunts me about Aurora is that, in hindsight, given more time, more understanding, I believe we might have found another way to solve the problems facing us during the Omnic Crisis. Had I known better, had I been wiser, perhaps I could have saved Aurora. Though, given how far Aurora took their initial plan, I think that's far more of a perceived fault on Liao's part than an actual one. And while it could actually kind of devalue what Aurora did, or even stop it from working if you tried to save her, I'm sure Liao would see that as a fair trade, at least at this point. But we cannot swim in the depths of regret. We must take the lessons learned and do better moving forward, as I hope to do in developing Echo, or whatever comes after her. Oh, what a way to think! Oh, shit! Ah! Wow, what an awful way to have to think about the person you made. Ah. Entry a bazillion later. Just to keep that sort of train going, and to show a little time skip. I will admit, I may have misjudged Cassidy. Despite his allegiance to Blackwatch and Commander Reyes, he has demonstrated not only a willingness to keep what I'm doing between us, his words, not mine, but also a more canny, intuitive understanding of what I'm trying to achieve than I gave him credit for. In fact, much as I hate to admit it, he's opened my eyes to something. Again, I love that she speaks in brackets. The actual Mina Liao sort of comes out a little bit, where she steps back from trying to use this clinical, distant language that she's already been shown doesn't always give her the actual results that she wants. I really like how her character is presented through this. And again, through the little quotation marks, and how she then refers to them, showing that she, as Echo, is actually really invested in the understanding of other humans. She's just not connecting it properly to her actual work, because she can't get emotionally invested again. Well, yeah. Cassidy was in the testing area earlier today, when Echo underwent a field psychology test. During the test, Echo eliminated the wrong target, and exhibited external signs of distress. What a funny thing for a supposedly non-sentient thing to display. Though he was certainly not supposed to interact with her, Cassidy de-escalated the situation, saying that it was just a mistake and she'd get it right next time. Echo's response was that she was not supposed to make mistakes. He laughed and assured her that everybody's bound to make mistakes. It's how you make your way in the world. No wonder a being exhibits external signs of distress upon making mistakes, not just because you made a mistake, but because you've been raised to never make a mistake. Echo here, to me, is proving how Liao is like trying to make her like a proxy of herself. She's trying to make an echo of herself that doesn't make mistakes, that never made mistakes, that didn't cause all these problems, that is perfect and will fix everything. Everybody's bound to make mistakes. It's how you make your way in the world. It's how Liao is who she is now. How she's able to make something like Echo. Someone like Echo. And how she's able to get to this point. And Cassidy, I love the way that, though he certainly was not meant to interact with her, petty human getting in the way of science, he did literally the most important thing that Echo could have been given in that point. Echo appeared to absorb this and thanked him for his reassurance. Echo was going through anxiety and Cassidy's just there like, yeah, you're okay, it's fine, don't worry. Like, yeah, you made a mistake. You never know how many mistakes I've made. That's how we get here, yeah? You're okay. She needed to hear that. Like, she literally needed to hear that. That's not fair. So much of this story is unfair on Echo to such an extreme degree, it's ridiculous. Cassidy laughed and said, "Well, I've never seen anything like you before, partner." And this was the moment that struck me. Echo laughed and responded, "Well, I've never seen anything like you before either." I don't exactly get the logic of how these sentences go together. Yeah, thank you for your reassurance. Well, I've never seen anything like you before, partner. How does that work? That's the one line I have a little problem with in this story, that I don't get the causality between the two lines. If this line had actually been written out in some way, thank you for your reassurance. It's strange dealing with new things. Huh, well, blow me, that's familiar. I've never seen anything like you before, partner, and you're doing alright. Something a bit more like that. It almost doesn't matter, because it's kind of worth it. It builds into this. Echo laughed and responded, "I've never seen anything like you before either. What a sad way to exist. She's never seen a cowboy before." They both seemed to find that quite funny. I was amused as well, but more to the point I was surprised, because the moment pointed up a failure on my part. I had never thought to probe her sense of humour before. I had never thought to just treat her as a person. This is one of the things that makes me think that someone like Snowball is actually sentient. Snowball's been shown to play. That's one of the most fundamental things about being a living being, is to engage in play. It's not just that Snowball plays, it's how, why, and when. There's no coding that would instruct Snowball to trail snowflakes for a little girl after a massive ice explosion. There's no coding that instructs a machine to do that. That's a sign that the Overwatch universe is made by people. Do you know what I mean? Her laughter did something else too. It renewed my hope that this new approach will work. Hope to me has always seemed the core driving force for Liao. When the army general in Genesis Dawn says,
"It wasn't science, it was arrogance,"
about the production of Aurora, yeah, I mean, he's not wrong. But this is why I can't frame Liao as a Dr. Frankenstein. That Frankenstein's flaw was a wish for control, the ability to defy the laws of nature. It was a very selfish aim, ultimately. Liao's getting there occasionally with how she treats Echo, but her core sort of driving fundamental force to me isn't founded in a need for control, it's in a hope for better things. She's not trying to bring back the dead to say that she did. She's trying to make new life so that it can live. But it also doesn't mean that she's without flaw or without fault. While my tests and adjustments are ongoing, I can't rule out that Echo might one day achieve the level of sophistication I seek. Okay, there you go, that's immediately being a bit more selfish. Or perhaps even more. The when or how remains uncertain. But it seems clear to me that Echo developing a sense of humour, very close to my own, interestingly, Liao, you are so blind to just really obvious normal things, is an important indicator that we're on the right track. As with empathy, it is an almost uniquely human trait. Again, this is the way that we need to treat how we impart onto the new world. By that I mean the new generations and the rest of the world itself, you know what I mean? Maybe you don't. Let's try and engage in some empathy then. Yes, see if I can help you understand me. It's good to know what information is for and how it can be used rather than just to be information. None of these things are good enough just being as they are. They all are in relation to how they can be applicable to the actual world. Hopefully that helps. Meanwhile, what Cassidy said, mistakes how we learn to make our way in the world, has made me realize that the question of how to equip Echo with the psychological and emotional tools to navigate the world is even more important than previously considered. That's sort of what I was just trying to get at. I can ensure that Echo is better prepared for what she will surely face simply by continuing to interact with her and teaching her everything I know. Not merely by providing information and employing the Socratic method, but through experiences. That's what I was trying to get at. Nice, sick, that makes a ton of sense. You've almost made like a perfect way to make an AI and you're just not realizing it. Although, admittedly, you've made something closer to a simulacrum. So the point she makes about human anomalics later, she's already, yeah. Liao, man, wow, your self-doubt is so getting in the way of your scientific study. It is, as Cassidy, of all people, pointed out, the way that human children learn to process and grow, by mimicking and interacting with others. She may be a child now, but she is growing quickly. This is another thing that I think is important about Orisa, that while neither Echo nor Orisa experienced the awakening, as far as we've been told, they were both created post the awakening, right? The fact that you can interpret them both as AI, as in most Omnics like Zenyatta and Ramatra are awakened intelligence, they were given their intelligence immediately, right? The two most modern AI, Echo and Orisa, they are artificial intelligence. But by artificial there, I mean made by people. Raised, grown. Orisa is so much more advanced and sentient as far as concerned because she has a mother. Like, if he's a bit of a young mother, but she's her mother. There's no other word for what she is. She has taught Orisa how to be in the world through actual experience and mistakes. There's so much about the world now that I could have been better prepared for when I was a child. Do you know what I mean? Giving people the tools to actually exist will help them exist better. Sadly, that's not some people's priority. Echo may be a child now, but she is growing quickly, and even put in quotation marks, she still doesn't want to see her as human. Also commenting on the fact that Echo's far beyond a child. Maybe she's a child in sort of relative terms. I am appending a transcript from a discussion I had with Echo during the week, as it feels relevant to this issue. Experiences and mistakes. Dr. Liao, I have a question. Of course, what would you like to know? What am I? Yeah, sick. Good start. Every person wants to know what they are in order to know how they relate to the world. It is important. And it means a hell of a lot more than this. You are the most sophisticated, complex android ever created, housing the most advanced AI in the world. Why? It's like dealing with a toddler, but a toddler who's veering on adult existentialism. I get them an advanced AI. A lot of Echo's thought processes actually emerge from that dynamic. Say if you listen to some of her voice lines, when Sombra's hacking her brain and she's like, have you made it past my 5th firewall? Haha. I'll give you a hint if you want. I will let you break into my brain, Sombra. The way that Echo relates to the world around her is very much immediately exploring how different she is. That's a strange parallel for a bunch of other experiences, because Echo is coming from such a removed paradigm to the rest of us. She actually can find some common ground with someone like Symmetra, who, as an autistic person, finds the way that she communicates isn't always received well by the rest of the world, because they don't think in the same way as her. Every person is the most sophisticated, complex meat being ever created, housing the most advanced mental system in the world. We are all this. But understanding even ourselves is hard enough. But again, Echo, getting to the real questions. Like, this is at the point where you're actually approaching sentience, actually trying to understand what does it mean to be me. And she's asking physically, but it's something on a personal level, like, who am I? That's what she's really asking here, I think. And then, again, why? Why do I exist? None of us ask to. It is my hope that you will demonstrate human levels of psychological, cognitive, and emotional complexity. I may not have been clear. Man, I meant, why am I? Why was I created? Why did you make me? It is a strange thing to have been made. It is weird, as natural as it is. That doesn't mean the experience is fine. But Echo's asking this kind of question on top of a whole heap of baggage. Like, why do I exist? You know my history. What I've done. Liao has made a proxy of herself that cannot make mistakes to make amends for all the awful repercussions of her well-intentioned actions. She's trying to make a scientifically perfect, defined, version of her ideals that she thinks can fix the world. She is putting all these hopes and dreams and responsibilities and expectations on a being that is only just about realizing not just that it exists, but that it exists for a reason. That's a lot. Aurora just got made and she was alive. And then obviously went on to do some crazy shit. Echo's been made with the express, intent to be so much more than that. But... pause. Why am I? Why was I created? Why did you create me? Pause. You know my history. What I've done. Yeah, we get all the information. What does that information sort of compile into? What does that make you feel that has made you do what you've done? I've accessed all historical archives concerning your life from childhood, and all personal files and memorabilia that you have shared with me. No wonder she's basically you. Pause. Then you know that I have much to answer for. I wanted to make a difference, to better the world, but it hasn't always worked out that way. No. The world seems filled with the ironic results of our best intentions. Yep. It's really, really hard to be able to portray your truest actual intentions that it results in the actual greatest good that you're after. It's so hard. And that's on a very, very low stakes level. Pause. Echo's really making her think. Yes. Omnic sentience only exposed new prejudices, created new problems. I hope that you, your generation, can help ease some of that. So that's a lot of pressure anyway. But then your generation, just like, oh, I'm gonna just make more of you when you're right, like a tool. But I'm not like an Omnic, am I? No, you're way more like a simulacrum. If by that you mean sentient, then no. But by no means are you lesser than they are. Sounds like you mean that as lesser, I'm afraid. Why could they not make a difference for the better? She means the sort of awakened Omnics here, I'm assuming that means. It shouldn't have been their burden to bear. They paid a price for something I did. Something I did without understanding the possible ramifications, in which the world was not prepared for. That's literally what you're making Echo do. She's continuing the cycle to try and save herself from what she did. It shouldn't have been Omnic's burden to bear. Making an entire new life form and then being like, hey, be a difference for the better. Maybe shouldn't have made them life forms. Maybe that's what's being said there. Paid a price for something I did. I made them all live. Fuck. That wasn't fair. And then the world wasn't prepared for that. Pause. Nice to see this coming from Echo here. Oh. Pause. You are sad. After so many years. As though you had lost a child. Something like that. I don't think Liao had thought about it that way until that point. It's very interesting that the proxy echo of yourself is sometimes able to actually solidify and define some of your expressions better than you are. Something like that. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. May I ask, do you consider me your child as well? Not exactly. But something like that. Something like that is how she referred to Aurora. And then Echo is coming to her mother for advice on how to deal with existing. And Liao can't even call her child. Liao is trying to distance herself from emotional attachment. She can't bring herself to care about another person like that, because at least in her terms, she feels that it invariably leads to loss. All of this is a very understandable manifestation of her grief and her attempts to make amends with the world for her own well-being. She's got the weight of the world on her shoulders as well, never mind what she's put on Echo, and she kind of needs someone to share it with her in that form. But that doesn't mean that she's justified in how she's gone about it. Creating a new life, a new proxy of yourself to help you take on the pressures of the world that you've accepted. is pretty hard on that new life. But something like that. That is the phrase she used. There's hope, but she doesn't want to see you like that yet, Echo. And you deserve better than that. And yet you said that you hope I can ease some of the world's problems. It may not be fair to you, but yes. Yep. A lot of this story isn't fair to Echo at all. Has the world not improved? Is it not better? In many ways it is. Although again, how, why, not to do with Echo. She's been hidden in a tiny room forever. The Omnic crisis is over, but that was Aurora's doing, with the explicit understanding that even the initial plan might not work. Omnics being sentient now is both good and bad for Omnics, and good and bad for the world, but it's definitely resulted in struggles, shall we say. Is it not better? In many ways it is. But then why have you equipped my body with weaponry? So yeah, so it's not even just a struggle to live up to all the reasons that Echo exists. Her body is a weapon. And you say that I'm here to help the world? Why the hell am I a gunman? Why do you think I've done that? Obviously, I am meant to serve the needs of Overwatch, supporting our peacekeeping efforts. Information doesn't mean anything. That's right. To tell you the truth, I suspect it's the only reason they've allowed me to continue working with you. There's always got to be some mitigating factor. It's a shame. But, again, restrictions are obviously sensible. Being a gun isn't exactly a restriction. Can't I be useful in other ways? It's not comforting to have these weapons as part of me. How do they make you feel? Like I've been given a terrible responsibility. I'm glad to hear you say that. Then why give them to me? So that you can protect those who cannot protect themselves. As again hard as it is, and as unfair as it is, if you're a gun, and you feel that it is a terrible responsibility to be said gun, that means you're probably only going to shoot the right people. Hopefully it means that you never have to fire a shot at all. Echo is the kind of person, already, from this one sentence, to be given this potential. The truest king is the person who doesn't want the throne. Obviously, there's a bit more nuance to it than that, but what a shame for that to be the reason you exist. So you can protect those who cannot protect themselves. Oh, so that's my responsibility now too? I see. Yes. That makes sense. Do you feel better? A little. At least she's trying to address feeling. Is there anything else? You said that you wanted to prepare me for the world. I assume you didn't mean that militarily, but psychologically. That's right. And I know that you've studied me intensely. You've taken on many of my speech patterns, behaviours, which makes sense given that I have been, until now, your primary means of contact with the world. I have tried to emulate you. I mean, other than your love of rhubarb sorbet. Echo's even got a voice line about wishing that she could eat. There's so much about what she is that frames how she relates to the world, and girl deserves some sorbet if you ask me. She's been asked to save a world that she can't experience many of the actual pleasures of. But I can also emulate others, such as Commander Morrison or Cassidy. The more time I spend with them, the better I can understand them. Why Cassidy? I like Cassidy. Huh. So do I. I know. I'm very much like you. Again, Echo even sort of having to be there like, yeah man, he's cool. Admit that you think he's cool. You like a person. That's okay. You're allowed to say that you like people. You're not just a woman stuck in a laboratory trying to save the world. And Echo's the one that you're worried about not having human emotional intelligence. Yes. But we must be circumspect about you. Ouch. I want to ease you into the world in your own time. I think I understand. Omnic sentience was a breakpoint in society. Humans were not prepared for the Omnics and they did not respond well. Nothing in the world was the same after Aurora. That's true. And that is not what I want for you. What is it that you want for me? To be the next step. The bridge that brings them together. Omnic and human. I like that. I'm glad she likes it. Because, and that is not what I want for you, makes it sound like, no, I don't want you to have to live with the world-changing responsibility to shoulder that Aurora did. Oh, what is it you want from me? To basically shoulder that kind of responsibility. But, as I'd mentioned throughout the story, Echo's been showing so much of how human she is. Sometimes even more so than Liao. Liao treats things way more robotically than the machine person does. That's an ironic result of your best intentions. Like you say, bridge the gap between human and omnic, but what exactly can that mean in the modern era of Overwatch when we've already got a population of omnics who can't reproduce, and there's rumblings of humans themselves accessing the iris? Damn, Echo, this is so unfair on you, man. Our conversation has changed me. Has changed how I think about Echo and what she is capable of. For the first time, I don't know her limitations, which is both unnerving and exciting. What is even more exciting is seeing my own feelings for the project reflected in Echo herself. I can't wait to see what she does next. And that is the end of the Echo Transcripts, written by Andrew Robinson, the illustration at the top by Hammling. It's a shame that Andrew Robinson had to be the only person who publicised this, that Overwatch don't want to tell you it exists. Because personally, that was really good. As a genuinely morally applicable allegory for how to look at the world and people within it as we stand right now. It's also a fascinating exploration of the kind of awful relationship between Liao and Echo. Echo has been treated so unfairly here, and Liao's self-doubt and manifestations of grief are only making that worse. The very end is finally, I don't know her limitations. Unnerving and exciting. I can't define everything. Good. She made Echo to fix things, but all she shows is how broken Liao is. She was built to be this definite, understandable thing, and all she proves is that Liao doesn't even understand herself, let alone Echo. Liao has made a proxy of herself that can do all the things that she actually wanted to do, so she can see the true results of her best intentions manifest in the world. And what she's done is make another version of herself that is suffering with those exact same anxieties piled on top of her by herself. Echo isn't Mina Liao's child. That is the wrong way to put it. She's her Echo, with all the positives and negatives that entails. Echo needs some emotional support. She shouldn't be emotional support for her mother. And obviously, she generally might have that emotional support now being let out into the world. She has someone like Cassidy, a person that she vocally likes. The exploration of just, I like a person, is so fundamental to being. If we didn't have other people, we wouldn't understand ourselves. Echo's now finally in a place where she can learn how to be making mistakes, but with the emotional support of people who care about her at her side. She's maybe living the life that Mina needed. Even the robotics community kind of doubted what she was doing with Aurora. She can't have felt supported. A lot of hopes have been put on both of these women, but it's lucky that they have each other, they have themselves. I think what Liao perhaps would learn through this whole story is not just that she needs to treat Echo with more humanity, is that she needs to treat herself with more humanity. Well, that got incredibly existential there. Surprising, right? Overwatch doesn't release stories for quite a while, and then suddenly, when it actually does turn up, It's actually pretty good. Genesis would be pretty good if they just showed it as one whole short. I'm sure that most people would actually be really happy with the full thing showed in its entirety, so it all makes sense together. Overwatch does some really good stuff when it tries. It's just a massive shame that the way that they've presented those things so often works against them. Like, this is possibly one of, if not the best, character explorations we've seen in an Overwatch story. And they don't even want to admit that it exists. A story literally about what it means to exist is struggling to prove that it exists. What an ironic result of such good intentions. So, hopefully there's a lot that we can actually take out of this. Hopefully Overwatch learn from their issue here. Hopefully you enjoyed this, getting to see some of how I interpret this story. There's going to be bits I've missed, there's going to be things that people see differently, or elements that I can't see, essentially because of who and what I am. I'd be very interested to hear anyone's thoughts in the comments. It's nice to be back. I hope everyone enjoyed my thoughts on the Echo Transcripts. As I said at the beginning, I am now aiming to be back and try and explore the Overwatch lore, as they're trying to take it seriously again right now. I won't lie, Apex is quietly doing the same thing in the background, that they're at least telling some interesting stories. Hopefully, if this carries on, you'll hear more from me in the future. But with that, I've been Euclidean Vision, the emotional support. Thanks for staying with me, friends. Best of luck out there, and may the glorious light of Best Girl shine within you. Bye-bye.